What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Boozadelic Chronicles. My name is Clark, and today I have Miss Dr. Jessica Southavela Jackson, and she is a chiropractor as well as
Functional medicine doctor.
functional medicine. The reason I decided to pull her on the show today is twofold. I'd like to get some information out there as to the benefits of, what her service can provide, as well as she has an interesting story. So you sent me this article that said Black Americans urge admission of Indochinese refugees, and you said this is how I got here. And as I read through it, I was like, wow, this is interesting. So I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, so actually, with everything going on recently, with the sentiments of people just trying to come together and realizing, hey, we should help each other out. And there are other groups who are like, well, this is not our fight. I really wanted to see what caused this sentiment, really, because I heard different sides of the story. And then I saw this from a friend, actually, they sent to me when they were researching some journalism articles. And I thought it was pretty interesting because I never learned about this myself either. I didn't exactly know how we got here in terms of the political aspects. But when I looked into it further, it was interesting to see that there were lots of reputable people going up to bat for us. You had people like MLK's wife, Coretta, and then you had Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was basically saying, hey, they fought for us in the past during the civil rights. Let's go up to bat for our brethren here. And basically, we don't owe them as a debt. We're doing this out of human decency. This is something for our community, because what does that say of us if we can't do something kind for mankind?
I can remember back in the early 70s or mid 70s when you first started seeing the influx. And I mean, back then as a kid, I even thought it was a terrible name that they called the folks that had to flee, the boat people. I mean, I was just like, what kind of name is that? So what was it like? Because you were a toddler when you came over, right?
Yeah.
And so you weren't able to bring too much stuff from home as far as, to remind you of home and the culture and all that.
Well, before we arrived here, actually, we lived in several refugee camps. So really, they're makeshift kind of camps that you didn't have access to a lot of things. What you probably see maybe even in media now of other refugee camps going on around the world. It really gives you perspective of what it is to really have the basic necessities of life. So yeah, we literally didn't have anything to bring over.
Wow. And that is just kind of mind-boggling, and for people that just don't get it. I mean, you can imagine being removed from your homeland, basically forced to for political asylum, war, whatever it is, and you put in these camps. You have nothing with you. You don't know. It's like they're like any like separation of the children from the family, like you see with a lot of the uh, Mexicans and other South American folks that they get put in those camps over here?
um, some of the separation happened in different ways. So some people, when they were trying to escape, they were separated from their families, either by opposing military. It was just something that they would either, during the process of escaping, death was inevitable too, because it was pretty harsh environment. People would wait in the jungles before crossing the river, and some people would be shot in the river. And so it was a harsh reality, especially if you had kids, really young ones that couldn't stay quiet. So
Wow, I could not imagine anything like that. So now, what were your first recollections of when you got like stateside and after you got out of the camps? Where did you end up?
we were actually sponsored. I actually had a family member who sponsored us over here. They had arrived before because they were working with I guess, a social community type of group, and then also working with churches here, um, which is, I guess, pretty common during that time too. And then when we arrived, I actually lived in, um, I guess it would be St. John's, North Portland area. Um, and it was different. It was a little different, diverse in the schools that I went to. I had a lot of different friends from different backgrounds, so that was actually kind of comforting, because then you had people who kind of knew your struggle, but at the same time, um, going in certain areas of St. John's too, um, you kind of felt like you didn't really fit in. So yeah, the model minority myth actually, it started with mostly with East Asians. So that was like the initial arrivers from back in, the early 1800s, with them coming to like the West Coast with mining or for gold in California, right? So from there on, especially when they started arriving more, 1940s, we had them, I guess, labeled as the minorities that would work hard and then reach success. And so why can't other colored people reach the same level of success? There has to be something different, right? But that's what's used now, is when you see like in college applications to go to school, they look at, well, they're more successful, but you've grouped a whole bunch of different types of Asians together, whereas the more recent influx of immigrants of the Southeast Asians, you see that they actually have lower chances of even reaching high school, or not high school, college, and even graduating high school. So they've used that whole wedge, I guess you would call it, of the model minority. And it's really a myth from that standpoint, to see, hey, we're doing better. And maybe there's a sense of unfairness, I would say. I think that when you're dividing communities that way, you only see that from a broader perspective, but you're not seeing the details of each individual person, from what community they're coming from.
Well, you know what they say about division, divide, and conquer. So it puts you in a very vulnerable spot.
It does. So you're making decisions off of something on a broader scale that doesn't even apply.
Well, I could, remember St. John's having, I grew up in Northeast Portland, but when I went to high school, I had a lot of friends that came in from St. John's. And when I started driving and going out there, it was kind of an area where you just literally was like almost being on the wrong side of the road somewhere in some places. It was like a tough working class community and stuff. And then I noticed that you started seeing more mixing of people and stuff, especially like, Roosevelt High School.
Right. That's where I went to.
Oh, okay. So you're a rough rider, huh? Now, I actually lived out there for about 20 years in my adult life. And I mean, I loved it. It was close to everything. And, neighborhood had changed a little bit, but it was still
Right.
very diverse. And so then you went to middle school out there. Did you go to Sinton or
I went to George.
George? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very familiar with that. Matter of fact, when I was working in the school district, I actually did some work over there as a substitute.
Oh, nice.
Then once everybody got here and you started seeing more and more, and I noticed that the community really started like expanding, and you saw businesses start popping up everywhere. And then today you go and you see like areas like in Rose City and stuff, and it's just like, you see all those businesses just like amazing. And I sit back and say, wow, how come we're not able to do that here in Portland? What made that work?
I think the one thing I remember is, when we came to the United States, we lived in a household of several generations,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it was a survival mechanism where we would basically pool all our savings together to help one person. And the idea was that once that we could get that person settled into their business, then we would move on to the next person. So it'd be a cascade of effect. I think that was one of the things that I noticed in terms of helping build businesses in the community itself.
Okay. And I actually saw a gentleman by the name of Dr. Edwin Nichols, and also I saw a presentation by Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary. And she talked about the different dichotomies, cultural axioms. And she said that the Asians, Southeast Asians, it was about the collective whole. And that explains that whole process right there, that people are willing to pool their money together to help somebody get ahead. And then, you just keep paying it forward.
Right.
Right. And, our thing is we value the interpersonal relationship with man. That seems to be the most important, where the Europeans is the acquisition of the object. And so it's interesting to see how these different cultural dichotomies actually determine, the outcome of the community. And I think that's something that we all can learn from.
Definitely, for
I
sure.
would just love to see that happen, just in masses for every community. And so we can kind of change the situation.
Definitely. And I think it doesn't necessarily have to be um, from a financial perspective to pool things. I think right now what we have, um, especially with a diverse community, whatever education or the greatest things about ourselves, we can actually provide that. We can give that back to the community, whatever that may be. But that's probably the strongest suit I think that we can pool in together.
Okay. And so one of the things I'm always big on, and if you've seen some of my videos, I'm always talking about knowledge of self
Yeah.
and how important that is. How much of a role do you think that has to do with your personal success?
For me, I think it's it was more about experiencing things, going out and talking to people. That kind of helped me figure out what I liked and what I wanted to do. It's really hard trying to do that, me personally, just because um, I wouldn't say I was an outgoing person. So you kind of have to break out of your shell in that aspect and just go forward and see what is different from you, and really how does that apply. For me, I think I was pushed onto medicine in general just because of my dad. He is a physician too, back home, but he couldn't bring that here. That's one of the things that you can't transfer over.
Mhm.
um, but I actually tried to shy away from that, and then I discovered it just by going out into the community and talking to people about their needs, what they have access to. And that's one of the things actually I learned, was that there are a lot of disparities in different communities, not just from genetics and things like that. They're actually the things that you can modify with lifestyle and nutrition.
Jessica and I have a history. When I first met her, I can't remember how many years ago. I was a birth operator. I used to go into a chiropractic clinic, and she was a massage therapist there at the time. And I think at that time you were studying, you were in school to work on being a chiropractor first, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how many years ago was that now?
Oh gosh, that was over 10 years.
Over 10 years. Oh my God. So your little babies aren't babies anymore.
Yeah.
I know you said your dad had kind of pushed you into medicine and stuff. So, I mean, did you know, was the chiropractic thing something that you said, this is what I want to do to get started and allow me to go to school, or is just something you fell into?
um I think he was pushing more towards conventional, just to be accepted. um because I think one of their struggles was that trying to fit in, coming to America was about trying to fit in and following the rules. And this is what you had to do to succeed here. And um, I tried. I did the whole pre-med thing. And I think one of the things when I finished high school and then started going into college, I actually traveled around a little bit. I worked with a group that was doing a documentary about Thai boxing, actually, with kids, and how they had to, at an early age, leave their families and to make a living for their families, to send money home, was to fight. And these are kids that are like from 6 to 8 years old, starting to train in the gym in boxing. So I looked at how there were different changes in their health at starting such an early age, and to do such a drastic change to their physical fitness. So that was my interest at the time. And I learned a lot, not just about medicine itself in the practice of caring for these kids, but also the different styles of medicine that went into caring for them.
I remember talking to you, and you kind of convinced me to try some alternative medicine, and I went to, and tried some acupuncture, and I really found that beneficial for my condition. So I want to thank you for pointing me in that direction. I didn't get into the herbs. Now tell me about the other part of this.
So functional medicine is making more progression, but the idea of it is really it's trying to combine not just the alternative medicine, but really it's trying to look at people as a whole. So things like what we're dealing with now is a lot of people in America with autoimmune diseases, right? It's not really understood in some kind of way. It's written off sometimes because the reason is it takes a while for diseases to develop, maybe 7 to 10 years before you realize, oh, there's something really going on. Where when you have kind of felt the symptoms, but you weren't sure what they were because it's so broad, and until it blows up and then gets diagnosed, you're kind of behind the game here. So the idea is to look at uh, when you start feeling these things, these symptoms, um, how to kind of look at it, not just with lab work, because sometimes that doesn't always tell you the story right away. It has to have a pattern. So we look at how we can change things from your lifestyle, whether it's an exercise or your sleep patterns. A lot of it is involving your gut bacteria, how that changes with your diet, and that can actually influence multiple imbalances in your body to cause disease.
Wow, that's amazing. Where were you at 18 years ago when I first got
I know because
diagnosed?
you've gone through your own plight, so
Wow. And so, well, I could definitely see where your services would be of benefit to me and somebody going through my condition. You talk about the autoimmune disease as you were describing that. I was thinking about my own situation, and when I initially started feeling these symptoms, they told me it was bursitis and arthritis. I had some blood work done, and just time's going by, I'm getting weaker and weaker, and nobody really figures it out. So they call it something. They put me on some drugs for what they thought was polymyositis. And then I find out like 17 years after the fact that there's a genetic component or a mutation,
right.
something called a signal recognition particle.
Okay.
And I never heard of it. I mean, I didn't even know about the disease I supposedly had either. But it's just, I think more extensive testing, probably, and they did a battery of tests. I can't fault them for that, but it was just I was fortunate enough to run into this doctor, Dr. Shaheen up at OHSU, who just said we got to do a real comprehensive genetic test on me based on he read my history and all that, and he said I can fix this. And it's like I'm starting to make some good progress, but just being able to maintain that, I can see where what you do is so valued and so needed.
Well, I'm glad you had that access because some people don't get that far, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, I mean, I came close to death once, maybe twice, and I'm fortunate that the creators kept me here for a reason, and I think the reason is to get this information out there. The universe lines me up with people like you that have the type of knowledge and can actually help people through these. And
Yeah.
so now, how can just say the average person could they benefit from you?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's lots of things that we can change even without access. I think there's a lot of issues with healthcare in itself too. Um, I can go on and on about that, but um, access is one thing. I think people, it varies whether they choose to go and see a doctor or a provider. Um, but I think not just access to a provider, access to the actual things that we're trying to change in your life, whether it's the actual exercise or the nutrition. I think a lot of the nutrition, the quality nutrition, is a big factor. Um, we've also lost sight of education on how to grow our own food. And I think that's one of the things I personally pass on as a provider. Not every doctor does that either, too. So um, it really varies with the type of provider you're seeing.
So I'm glad you mentioned it, growing your own food. This is the first year that I actually put a garden in at my house. I mean, I normally go to New Seasons and stuff, but I mean, I just noticed like the produce when I go out there and pick some lettuce and greens and all that, they're just so crisp and they taste so much better.
Definitely, definitely.
How can we kind of like get all the people in the different communities to really get into like, because I know for a while they were doing the community gardens and stuff.
Yeah,
And I mean, because a lot of people just don't have the space. And I mean, you can get like the little grow bags and all that, but still, I mean, if you got a family of five and you're living in an apartment which just has a little patio, you
yeah.
so that's one of the things that I'm really looking at is yeah, I would like to see in the communities.
I think there's a strong movement towards that, coming back towards that, especially now because people were. Uh, I've seen a lot of nurseries actually sell out of things, so people are getting some interest into going back into that. It's just hard because people aren't all when they go into that, they're not exactly educated in the process of it, and I think that's something we need to.
Yeah, I mean, my mom, she was an avid gardener. I don't know if you saw the video I put up on Facebook of her garden, but I mean, it's like crazy. It looks like it should be at home and garden now, but my cousin Rusty and his partner, they've been over there helping her get that together. But what do you think about how can we get like the different communities? You got people of different faiths, got people of different cultures, but you got them all living in like the same neighborhood. I look it over by like my mom's neighborhood. We got all kinds of folks, and I do see they have a big community garden over there. But I'd like to see that replicated throughout the greater Portland area, and
Definitely.
find a way that we could actually provide for those low income folks because I mean everybody knows that the low income food they make it more convenient to buy food that will just like harden your arteries and give you
Mhm.
diabetes than food that's actually going to keep you healthy, the
Right.
food that we ate before we were indoctrinated into this culture here.
Very much so. Yeah, I think that goes all back, like I was saying earlier, is pooling your resources the same way as the community. This is on a bigger level, but definitely we can do that. I,
Uh-huh.
I foresee that as an option. I think reaching out to different organizations to see if they can be a place of hosting for that. Um, that way we can bring the community together. Um, one that I kind of favor, I think Urban League is something I would reach out to.
Okay, Urban League of Portland. And then for any viewers out there that have any hookups or interested, you can go ahead and make sure that in the description, you'll find a link to get a hold of me. You'll find a link to get a hold of Jessica. And so where can folks find you?
Um, if you're on social media, actually on Instagram. I'm on Dr. Jessica Jackson. And then actually, so if you want to work with me at my clinic, you can actually go to my website. It's www.suneyawellness, SUNEYA wellness.com.
Okay, and then for now, are your do the most of the major medical providers or do they cover your services or is that considered alternative medicate or medicine now?
Um, some things are covered. It really varies on the insurance companies and it will change from year to year.
Uh-huh.
I try to approach it with sliding scales or anything that I can offer conveniently. And I usually by that way, I'm hoping to offer it even with the like upfront cash rate is much lower than what insurance would be covering. So
Okay. That's good to know. So, well, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. I'd like to thank Dr. Jessica South Vela Jackson. I used to call her J South back in the day. Dr. J South, y'all. So if you like this video, make sure you go ahead and then like it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that share button. And also click on that little bell. It'll give you notifications every time I post some new content. So once again, I'd like to thank Dr. J.
thank you for having me.
Well,